All right, so our speaker today is Paige Wheeler, who's very dedicated, coming to us on vacation and everything. So Paige is the founder of Creative Media Agency, Inc., and she has managed to merge her creativity and business savvy to create an agency that's dedicated to maximizing author potential. And her company represents authors on the New York Times, on the USA Today, Publishers Weekly, and many international bestseller lists. And she is an agent, and she has several agents who work with her. We're going to have two of her agents in the workshop afterwards looking at our query letters. And right now, I'm going to turn this over to Paige, and everyone lend us your ears. So Paige, you're on.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me, everyone, on what we have here on the East Coast finally is a rainy Saturday. We've had a little bit of a heat wave here, and of course I chose one of the hottest weeks of the year to go to Boston, where it was 100 degrees and they aren't used to the heat. So I know you guys down in the Southwest, you're used to it being hot and broiling, but evidently people here in New England, which is where I'm visiting, they're not used to it. So hopefully I'll try and send the rain your way, because we now have a turn to rain. In any case, when I was getting ready for this speech, I asked what the level was and what the comfort level was of working with agents, and I was told just start at the beginning, and I'm happy to do that. I think one of the things I don't like about my job is being asked what I do for a living, because no one understands. Everyone seems to think I'm either an editor or a writer. And that's not what an agent does. And I finally learned to kind of synthesize it and ask people, you know that athletes have agents and actors have agents. Well, writers have agents too. So as an agent, I'm the middleman or middlewoman, as the case may be, helping represent authors and manage their careers. And this can be from debut authors who have never been published before, all the way to authors who have achieved some level of success or a great level of success. Because I think what you find is that you really need an advocate through each stage of your career. At the beginning, you really aren't sure what's happening, and then it gets much more complicated the more sophisticated your career becomes and the more titles you have in your list, right? And so I help authors manage every aspect of that. So when I was first hearing about this, though, I was working in a bookstore trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I heard of something called the AAR, Associations of Authors Representatives. And I thought, wow, that sounds like a fun job. So being very naive, I wrote away to them, not knowing it was a volunteer only position, saying, hey, I'd like to work for you. And of course they said, no, this is not something we do. Fast forward to, I actually got a job in publishing. I was working in editorial, and I took a class called Lunching for a Living, the Role of the Literary Agent in Book Publishing. And I thought, I love to eat lunch. This sounds amazing. And I learned a little bit more about what an agent does. And so I'm going to share a lot of what I learned at the very beginning, starting with baby steps, and bring you guys up to speed on how you can best use an agent through your career or through, let's say, an imaginary project that you may have that you're trying to sell. So let me first start off with, how does an agent find clients? How do we get our clients? We find authors often by doing something like this, attending writers' conferences. That's a great way. They also come in over the transom through query letters, or maybe I happen to have, it's going to show up upside down, but I happen to have Poets and Writers magazine. There are a lot of publications that are focused on writing and the craft of writing. And what an agent may do is write articles. They can put themselves out there that way. Clearly, we all have websites. A lot of people In addition to conferences, they may have columns in newspapers. You also can find agents just by reading the acknowledgement section of books, by asking around, following things like Publishers Weekly or Publishers Marketplace. Those often list agents as well. So what you want to do as an author is try and find an agent that represents your type of material. You know the area. A lot of you are sophisticated enough to know the type of material that you're writing. Is it children's books? Is it picture books? Is it romance? Are they Westerns? Are they thrillers? Is it nonfiction, memoir, what have you, self-help? You kind of know what you're writing, right? So you need to find agents who represent those types of materials. So things like Southwestern Writers, you guys have agents come in and speak, and that's a great way. But you may belong to different organizations, like, let's say, the Thriller Writers of America, or Romance Writers of America, or Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, or Historical Society, Historical Writers Society, right? So there's all these different organizations that cater to the genres of which you're writing. When they have guest speakers that include agents, take notice. Also network with authors in those organizations. So that's just a little bit of help on how to sort of target the agents that may be right to you, for you. But the next thing you need to do is make contact with them. And if you're not at a writer's conference, what you would do is you would send out a query letter. And I see so many, and you guys are going to have the seminar following my speech. A lot of authors get caught up in writing a query letter and they think it's a very scary thing. And in fact, it's not. If you're very comfortable with your material, then you should easily write your query letter. Although, of course, you're going to struggle with it. We all do. But a query letter is just simply a cover letter. Just like when you send off a resume, you write a cover letter and attach your resume. Query letter is the same thing. It's just a cover letter when usually you submit maybe the first 5 pages of your manuscript, which is what I request when you're sending your material in blindly. Okay, these blind submissions that come in, you do a query letter. I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of that because I think that you're going to get that seminar after I stop speaking. But there are a lot of great books out there on how to write a great query letter. On my website, I have some helpful tips as well. I can't stop myself, so I will say a couple of things. Definitely, if you can identify what you're writing, that's helpful. Just this morning, I got a query letter for poetry. I don't represent poetry, so that was an automatic rejection. And also how long it is. I did get, I got a 225,000 word thriller. And of course, that's most likely too long. So knowing that up front was very helpful. But there's some tips in there of how to write a great query letter to try and capture the interest of an agent. So now what I do is, as these query letters are coming in, I read them. And I actually have a staff who reads them as well. All right, Anne just asked me a question. What are your submission guidelines? Okay, I will probably answer that in a bit, but you can see my submission. I'll jump on it now. When I see some queries that come in, I still want, even for memoir, and a query letter in the first 5 pages so I can see your writing. If I like it, and or my staff likes it, because I have this summer semester, I have 14 interns, and they are reading all the queries that come in. I always have a large internship program, and they read it, and we discuss it during our staff meetings. Even if all of them say no, if I like it, I'll request it. If all of them say yes, it doesn't mean that I'll request it, but maybe I will take a second look. If I like that query, then I will request more material. Now, if it's fiction, I generally request 3 chapters and a synopsis. If it's nonfiction, I request the nonfiction book proposal and a couple of sample chapters. If it's memoir, and this is to Anne's question, I usually request at least a couple of chapters and the nonfiction book proposal. When I go to sell memoir, and I'm talking memoir in particular because Anne just asked, I will probably want the first 100 pages as well as that nonfiction book proposal. All right. Nonfiction can generally be sold without the complete manuscript being written. Fiction, if you're a debut author, usually needs to have that complete manuscript written. All right. So now you're going to say, but wait a minute, Paige, you said you only wanted to see the first couple chapters if it's fiction. Why is that? Well, because I'm old. Back in the day when I first started we didn't have electronic submissions. For those of you who remember, and feel free to raise your hand since I can see a lot of you, remember when you had to photocopy all those pages, stuff it in the Jiffy envelope, send a self-addressed stamped envelope, take it to the post office and mail it in. And in my office, I had bookshelves and bookshelves of all that stuff, right? Well, it was so much easier for people just to send the first 3 chapters. And frankly, just for my space in New York City, it was so much easier just to get the first 3 chapters, because then I could look and say, you know what, this isn't for me. That way it saved you money on printing and mailing and everything. You're like, well, okay, Paige, that was then, but it's now. Why don't you just ask us to send the complete manuscript? And many agents do. I don't, because I want a hard stop. I want to make myself stop and say, okay, I'm at the end of these 3 chapters. Am I desperate to have more, or is it just okay? It's a great way to make yourself stop and reassess what you're reading, because as you know, you can be sucked in to try and say, all right, do I keep waiting for it to get better, or do I have to assess now? If I like those 3 sample chapters for fiction, I'm going to go ahead and request the complete. For nonfiction, if I find that nonfiction book proposal really isn't up to snuff, we may be able to work on that, but how are those sample chapters? Now, how many of you, and I know not everyone has their camera on, and I can't possibly see all 75 of you, but how many of you, I guess I could ask, how many in the group actually do write nonfiction, or they're in the middle of writing nonfiction? All right, I already see a bunch of hands. So for nonfiction, let me go into that a little bit more, and I don't want to take up the whole time talking about how to do this. Your nonfiction book proposal, if you're writing memoir, which I find, I've been to the SouthWest Writers Conference in person before, and I know there are a lot of you that are writing your memoirs, right? Some of you may be famous, great. I see Miss Jones there, and she's kind of famous, right? But some of you may be famous, which is terrific. So you already have a great author comp going on. But a lot of you aren't. You're writing about an experience that is transformative, that is something took place that changed your worldview. And so that it's not about how well known you are. It's going to be how well you write, how well you express that transformative experience in memoir. Otherwise, a lot of the importance is what for nonfiction. Is this a fresh take on a subject matter? So what is new that's being stated? Why are you, the author, the perfect person to talk about this? So are you an expert in the field? And third, what is your platform? And that's where everyone kind of groans. But how are you going to get that message out? Are you already pretty well known? Do you write a syndicated column? A lot of people talk about social media. So do you have a huge social media following? Maybe you give speeches all around the country, or maybe through Zoom, do you give speeches a lot? What is the platform? What is the audience that's already there? The publisher basically wants to have an easy time as possible trying to sell into that marketplace. And so for nonfiction, that's why that nonfiction book proposal is so important. They're trying to see, all right, how expert is this author to talk about this subject, right? Which, if you're talking about a cookbook, how well known are you as a chef? If you're talking about a diet regimen, you know, are you a famous dietitian? that sort of thing. But when it comes to memoir, it's a little bit different because you may have had an interesting experience either traveling or, for example, I have an author who decided to kind of drop off the grid and homestead. That's pretty interesting. He had this whole life experience, but he was also a professor at a university, and the way he wrote about his experience was really captivating. So that's important too. And I don't want to get too bogged down in this, but when you submit to the agents, make sure that your sample chapters, your complete manuscript, or if it's nonfiction, that it really follows all the guidelines and it's really tight. It really is going to make us take notice. But let me continue of how an agent can help you with your career. So let's say, as an agent, I love your writing. I asked for the first 3 chapters for fiction. I fell in love with it. I requested the complete. I still love it. The next thing I do is I ask you for, I actually send my retainer to you. All right. Agents now have retainers or agency agreements. Again, back in the day, I'm going to make myself sound very old. This used to be a handshake. All right. We had a very low-key arrangement because your arrangement with your agent is often put in the contract, in the agency agreement. There's a section of the publishing agreement once it's sold that outlines that relationship. But we're so corporate now. There's been so many mergers that even agenting has become very corporate, and we have an agreement ahead of time once we sign the author that says, here are my responsibilities and here are your responsibilities, just so there's no misunderstanding. So once I've found material that I like, I send out the agency agreement. You take a look at it. You ask if you have any questions about it, you ask me, and then we sign. And then and only then, for me, I'm going to go back and I will probably, after I receive the signed agreement, I'm going to probably say, hey, I loved your material. I'm actually going to have you improve it now. Because as an agent, when I send material out to editors, I want it to be in perfect shape, or as close to perfect as I think is possible. So once that author has signed the agency agreement, then I'll say, terrific. I'm going to send you now my revision notes, my editorial letter of how I think you can improve it. If you're writing nonfiction, I might be giving comments on how you can improve your nonfiction book proposal, or maybe say you need to change your chapter summaries around, or whatever that may be. But for fiction, I'm going to give you an editorial letter. And we may go through just one round of changes. We may go through a couple of rounds of changes. Not every agent does this, but more often than not, we do. Back in the 90s, for those of you who remember, there's been a lot of mergers with publishing companies. Do you guys remember Bantam, Doubleday, Dell, Harper Collins merger? Harper merged with Collins, all those stuff. A lot of editors were let go since the late 90s, and a lot of them became agents, and then they started to take on that editorial input. So many agents have had to step up their game and also use their editorial skills to make sure that the project that's going out is really in dynamite shape. Once the author and the agent both think this is as good as we can get it, all right? And it's a fine line for an agent to have the author make changes, because you don't want to do it so much that when you send it out, an editor is going to undo some of those changes, right? So we all admit it's a fine line. But once that material is ready, then what we do is we have to figure out where we should send it. So then that's when we come up and we write a pitch letter. What is a pitch letter, you say? Well, a pitch letter is very similar to your query letter. It's a sales tool that agents use. It's a cover letter before we send the manuscript. It's how we reach out to editors. So I get my pitch letter ready, and then I figure out what publishing houses and what imprints are best suited for this project. And this is all part of going back to what I talked about lunching for a living. I know from all of my networking what editors are hungry for, what they've acquired too much of, maybe what they're really good at, which editors do a great job kind of shining and polishing that gem, and what editors kind of don't do a great job and they just kind of turn it in. My job is to know all that. Sometimes, frustratingly enough, the top editors who do a great job have a very full list, which means they may only take on 1 or 2 projects a year. So an agent has to decide, do I want to send it to that top editor and really risk getting a rejection? Or maybe I want to send it to a younger editor who's hungrier and trying to build her list. She may not be as sophisticated or established, but maybe she's more likely to acquire. And I use she a lot because traditionally this publishing is female focused. So that's why I use she. So when I am doing that, I have to evaluate all of those sort of things. Does this editor like this? Have they acquired too much of this recently? Is this imprint over inventoried? But not only that, you can't send to 2 editors within the same imprint. So I only get 1 editor, 1 shot. If they reject it, I'm done. I can't send it to another editor there, all right? Not only that, certain imprints within the same publishing house compete against each other, so you can't send it to them simultaneously. For example, I couldn't send it to, I'm trying to think, I'm going to get this wrong, Crown and maybe Pam Dorman at the same time because they have the same reporting structure. So it's a little bit more complicated than I think a lot of people realize of how you submit material. And I think I got the Crown and the Pam Dorman wrong, but it doesn't matter. So we have to know the reporting structure of, if I have a choice between sending it to this imprint and this imprint, and they all have the same reporting structure, which one would I do? And someone just said, can you define an imprint? Okay, good question. You know, you have the publishing houses of Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins. Those are some of the biggies, right? You have some mid-sized ones. You have Kensington, you have Skyhorse, but imprints within, let's say, the bigger ones. Let's say within Macmillan, you have St. Martin's, you have Griffin, you have Tor, right? And I'm talking mostly adult. I'm not even talking children's books. So within the publishing houses, there are different imprints. Imprints are really ways to identify kind of marketing arms of how they label books. You'll see on the spine of your books, there will be the imprint of the house. For example, Berkeley is an imprint of Penguin Random House. It's a Berkeley book. The parent company is Penguin Random House, but Berkeley's the imprint, right? Pam Dorman Books is an imprint of Penguin Random House. Penguin is an imprint of Penguin Random House. Crown is an imprint of Penguin Random House, right? So all these imprints, a lot of these imprints have a specific vision or point of view. Going back to Berkeley, Berkeley is very commercial. They were mass market. Now they've really moved into trade. They do women's fiction and mystery. They're most known for that. Romance as well, of course, versus another imprint like Crown does Crown Business. Crown has a different point of view and stands for something else. So that's a little bit about imprints. I want to get too deep into this because this is a very broad subject. But as your agent, what I'm trying to do at this stage of the project going through the pipeline is target which editors and which houses would be best for your book. Now I could decide to submit in a small submission, maybe just 6 editors, or I could do a large submission, maybe 30 editors. What's the difference, you say? Well, sometimes it's great to, or I could do exclusive, just 1 editor. All right, and that editor, I'd give a timeline. Sometimes if I do like a small submission, 6, 7 editors, I'd start to get feedback. And if everyone gives me the same feedback, oh, that protagonist was so unlikable, I had to put it down, then I could go back to the author and say, hey, we need to change this. Everyone's hating the protagonist. Let's make her more likable. And so that way we haven't ruined all of our chances. If we go out to let's say we go out to 30 editors all at once and they all hate it, then we're kind of done, right? So if you feel that that material is in really great shape, you can do a wide submission. If you either really know the particular editors you want to send to, or you may be needing some feedback, then maybe you want to do a smaller submission, right? So I'm making those decisions on your behalf, knowing the marketplace, knowing the editors, knowing all this stuff. Now, again, to sound old, it used to be that what you would do is you'd pick up the phone and you'd call the editor and you'd do the verbal pitch. Hey, Sarah, I have this amazing material. This is what it's about. It's a story of X. You're going to love it. It would fit in your list. It's very similar to this book. Do you want to take a look? And they'd say, oh my gosh, Paige, of course, it sounds amazing. Send it to me. But we're working with a different generation of editors who seem to avoid the phone. I don't know if a lot of you have noticed that, but it's all email all the time. So over the past 10 years, submissions now are mainly done by email, where we would email them. You can do it a couple different ways. You can email them the query of, hey, I have this great project. Here's what it's about. Do you want to take a look? Should I send it to you? Or you could just send your pitch with the manuscript attached saying, I'm excited to share with you this. I hope you love it. Please send it out. Please get back to me after you've done reading it. So what I'm saying is there's a couple of different strategies to even submitting projects: by phone, by querying by email, or just by sending it directly to them. All right. So I'm also trying to manage that and figure what is best for this particular project. Once I send it out, I usually have a deadline that I've listed, and that's when the authors are biting their nails, right? You're like, oh my gosh, am I going to get a bunch of rejections? Is what's going to happen? Am I going to get an auction? Ideally, everyone loves it. I start getting phone calls 24 to 48 hours. This is ideally, by the way. And everyone wants it. We start to hold an auction. That doesn't happen all the time. The most common way that authors end up selling their book is they get a few rejections, then maybe they get someone who's interested, maybe one or two editors love it, maybe you'll have an auction, or maybe we'll just have someone who loves it and that's who you sell it to. So once there's interest, then you can start. What I could do is also send it out to other editors if I haven't sent it out to everyone all at once, and try and manage that. So I am managing that whole submission and sales process. I might even be managing an auction, trying to keep you, the author, informed at every step of the way. Now, what I do as rejections come in, because 9 times out of 10, there is going to be a few rejections, I share those rejections with you. Some authors say, I can't bear it. It's so painful. Don't let me know. But most authors say, I'd like to know. What are they saying? Sometimes they actually are pretty informative. Hey, I really loved it up to this point, but I thought the second half really lagged. Or, I just didn't feel it felt fresh. I received 3 other submissions just this week of a similar nature, and this one just wasn't fresh. So the author and I try and go back with the rejections to see if we can find out any pertinent information that can help us inform either future submissions or how we can tweak it. Once we do have someone who's interested and starts to make an offer, then I negotiate that contract. And they're basic deal terms. I don't want to get too much into this, but how an agent closes a deal is based on a couple of different things: the advance, the territory, the format, the payout, different subrights. Do we hold on to audio? Do we hold on to film? Do we hold on to book club? What do we hold on to? Do we hold on to dramatic rights? And even what consultations do we have? Do we get approval or consults over cover, over back cover copy? These are the sort of things that I'm negotiating in the selling stage, right? When the editor and I both discover that she loves it. I want to sell it to her. We come to a deal. And these are those deal points. I memorialize those deal points in what's called a deal memo. And I send it off to her to confirm our understanding. Everything looks great. Then we wait for the contract. Now, the contract used to take about 4 to 6 weeks and it'd be sent to me by paper. But of course, even those publishers who were doing it that way, once COVID hit, almost everyone now sends it electronically, which has really sped up the process. So once I get that contract, it's generally not just a 2-page contract, guys. We're talking, especially with something like Penguin Random House, it used to be, back in print days, legal size paper, small print, 18 to 25 pages, depending. That's more than just a 1.5-page deal memo. So first I have to compare the deal memo that I wrote up, that the terms match the contract. And then agents have what we call boilerplate. Hopefully, we have previously negotiated another contract with that publishing company, Macmillan, Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, Penguin Random House. And I've already gotten a lot of gimmies. I've already negotiated what the reversion, what is standard creative media agency reversion clause? What is the standard export sales clause? What is the standard? I already have that. If it's a new publisher, or in the case of HarperCollins, if they have recently updated their contract, then those negotiations take a little bit longer, because then suddenly I'm saying, hey, wait a minute, you've changed this clause. I don't like this clause. You know, we need to negotiate that. So negotiations can take anywhere from a couple of weeks to, when HarperCollins did their major contract change, this must have been 9 years ago. It took us 7 months to negotiate the contract. Some people were already turning in their manuscript and we still hadn't finished negotiating the contract. It was awful. I was talking to an attorney just last week. I have a film deal that's coming up and I was using this attorney, and he and I were reminiscing when HarperCollins, it was a nightmare. That guy who did all that eventually got fired because he held almost every agency up for months and months. I mean, we were all pulling out our hair. Anyway, so this is a process that we handle for the author, is making sure that contract protects you. Now, I need to say at this point, you have not paid me a single dime. I work on commission. So all this work, the reading, the revising, the writing the pitch letter, the submitting, is all for nothing, is free until we finish that contract and I get that money, the first money comes in. I get a percentage of what you make. So it behooves me to make the best possible deal for you, because we're in this together, right? If you make money, I make money. If you're getting screwed, I'm getting screwed too. So I want to make sure that that deal is great. And sometimes my author, I have 2 contracts on my desk right now. And this one author's like, I really want the money. Come on, let's just put it through. I'm like, no, you're going to screw yourself on this term. They changed this term and they're doing this to you and you're going to lose money on this. I'm going to fight this. Don't try and push me through this, because it affects me too. So once that contract has gone through, then we get our money on signing. And a lot of my job is chasing the money. Hey, wait, you do money. Come on, where is it? Where is it? Hey, the author has turned in the complete manuscript, and due to the contract, it says you have 30 days or 45 days to review the manuscript and approve it. Why haven't you approved it? What's going on? I am, as I tell my husband, I'm a professional, because that's what I do. I'm always nagging the editor in a very nice way, of course, but I'm saying, where is this? Have we seen the cover? What's going on? So my job is to nag the editor to make sure she's put that money through for the unsigning payment, delivering acceptance payment, sometimes on publication payment. Since the pandemic started, I don't know if any of you have a deal with Penguin Random House. Anita, I don't think you do. They actually changed their payout structure to 4ths and 5ths. So some people are getting paid 1 year post publication and some people even 2 years post, none of my clients, but even that far out. It's been really horrible because they thought the pandemic was going to be, publishing was going to take a hit. We have found the exact opposite, that publishing houses have actually made money, primarily in the backlist, but they've made money. So there's no excuse for them to continue these outrageous payout structures. And so a lot of agents are really fighting it, saying, Penguin Random House, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. But it's our job to fight all this stuff. So once we have the auction, we have the contract, we've gotten the payout, the author is either, if it's nonfiction, they're writing the book. If it was complete, then maybe they're doing the changes that the editor is now sending an editorial letter to say, hey, I know you sold it, it was in pretty good shape. I told you I loved it, but I need to make some more changes. All right. So while you are getting that editorial letter from the editor, what am I doing? I'm trying to sell those sub rights that we held on to. So I am working with my foreign rights team to make sure that the different territories have it. I'm not even going to go into the fact that I could have done that before publication. I'm just, to make it easier, I'm going to talk about it as if it happens after publication. After I sell the book. So I am making sure my foreign rights team is going out to all the territories that we work with to try and sell Scandinavian rights, French rights, Russian rights, Polish rights, Japanese rights, Chinese rights, you can imagine all those territories. We're selling into that. If we held onto audio, which is almost impossible nowadays, then we're trying to sell audio rights. 9 times out of 10, publishers insist on holding on to audio. And then a savvy agent is finding ways to either have them revert if they haven't sold or do other things. But if I happen to be lucky enough to hold on to audio, then I'm trying to sell audio rights. Film rights. We have that complete manuscript in, I'm selling film rights. We can sometimes sell film rights when it's not complete. If I went into every different situation, we'd be here for hours. So I'm going to make it as simple as possible. So I'm trying to sell film rights. All right. So all these sub rights that we held on to, I am trying to maximize your intellectual property rights by making sure we're making money off of that. Okay. You are, if it's fiction, probably doing revisions. All right. So we're doing that as well. Now, during this time, we have where I'm selling this. At some point, we're going to have to start setting up a PR and marketing meeting. So I'm going to start nudging the editor to say, okay, I want to see the book cover. I want to see the back cover copy. And hey, by the way, are you going to promote this? When are we having that meeting with the marketing team? Because as you know, with all these self-published titles out there, it's really hard to get noticed. So you want to find out what is that publishing house doing to help you get noticed. And there is a difference between marketing and publicity. And there are some gray areas as well. It can be very confusing. But in short terms, marketing, you have to nudge for that sooner because that's what the publisher pays for. That co-op money, for example, when they put it on a table in a bookstore, that's actually paid for. All right. Maybe getting banners and stuff like that, that's paid for. Publicity is trying to get reviews, doing stuff like that. That's not paid for. So we should have that meeting, make sure you're involved in that meeting. My job is to nudge it. We have that, then you and I might be discussing, you know what, we're not happy with what they're doing. Maybe we need to find an outside publicist as well. And then we start that process of trying to maybe find an outside publicist to help, because I've never found most authors are never satisfied with what their publisher is doing. I think they can always be doing more. So I help you with that process. Finally, publication day comes out. You've already either approved the cover, been consulted on the cover, or if you weren't lucky, they threw a cover up and you hate it, but that's the way it goes. The book comes out. Huzzah, we've been checking. You've been doing your part by promoting it. I've been supporting you. We have a great, yay, book's out. You make sure everyone's knows about it. The book sells. Hopefully, maybe you've hit a list. If you haven't hit a list, maybe you've been noticed. Maybe you've got some great PR. Time goes by, maybe some rights that I wasn't able to sell before the book came out, maybe I'm able to sell now. Then what am I doing? We are still trying to do stuff, but about a 6-week post-publication window, a lot of that publicity effort is falling off. I still have other clients, but I'm still supporting you. Time goes by. And at some point, we start to get royalty statements coming in, right? Royalty statements generally happen twice a year, but sometimes a couple more times than that. Sometimes it's quarterly. With Amazon, it's monthly. And I'm the one tracking that. Have they allocated all that money? Is that appropriate? You're getting those royalty statements too. Remember, you don't earn out your advance, whatever that advance is, until those royalties that you earn equal the advance that they paid. Once you've earned out, then you'll actually start getting royalties, right? An advance is kind of like a draw. So once you have earned out royalties, we're tracking all that. We're making sure, hey, wait a minute, they informed us we had a Romanian sale. I don't see it in this royalty statement. Then I have to go and nag them and say, wait a minute, what happened to that money for that Romanian sale? That's my job, is to keep on top of that. So more time goes by and suddenly those royalty statements are coming in and we're not seeing many sales, nothing much happening. And then I look at that reversion clause that I negotiated in the contract. And I said, wait a minute, it looks like we haven't made many sales. This is going to trigger a reversion. This book, I'm going to say, is out of print. Let's revert the rights back to you, the author. And that may be a couple years post-publication, maybe it's a decade, who knows? But this relationship between you when you first queried me until now, maybe a couple years post-publication, maybe 10 years post-publication, maybe even 20 years post-publication, we're still working together. I've been sending you royalty statements at least twice a year, checks, whatever. But maybe now it's time to revert those rights back to you. And then I trigger that. I write the reversion request. I'm on top of them because they're going to drag their heels, say, wait a minute, I sent it to you 2 months ago, 3 months ago. You need to, if you don't respond to me in another 6 weeks, I'm going to call it reverted. And then we go on. And that's, in short, a life cycle of how an agent can support you from the time you send that query letter all the way until the book is out of print. Hopefully that was helpful. Any questions? I see some came up. Let's see. All right, should I go through and answer some of these? Do you guys want me to do that came in, or what do you think?
Yeah, we've got about 10 minutes, and the one I can see right now is, other than meeting an agent at a conference, what's the best way to find an agent?
I went through this a little bit, and a lot of people think that meeting an agent, I don't know how to get rid of this. Let's see, let me get rid of this. Meeting agents at a conference is the best way. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think the best way is finding an agent who handles material like you, who you can kind of sense their taste, right? That you've heard great things about, and you can just query them by over the transom. It's even better though if you happen to have a friend who's represented by that, who can provide an introduction. So referrals are amazing ways. So if you have a friend who is represented by that agent, that's great. If you've read books that agent has represented and your book is similar, you should certainly mention that in the query letter. And this is the dirty secret that a lot of people don't want to know, having that face-to-face pitch really doesn't matter, because you may be able to talk about your project incredibly well, but maybe your writing isn't up to snuff. Or maybe you're an introvert and you can't really talk about your project succinctly because you're too nervous, but you write beautifully. Ultimately, what matters is how well you write. And the only way I can see that is to read your writing. So getting those pages in front of me is the best way. And that's usually by having me read your query, having you read a few sample chapters, what have you. So definitely doing something like this where you can say, hey, you'll get put up at the top of the pile because you guys attended this and listened to me, and you can probably say, hey, I heard you on. I'll probably say in your query, say SouthWest writers, if If you want to send it to me, you can do that and I'll take a special look. But other than that, just having a really strong project. Even if you were best friends with someone I represent, if the material isn't right for me or I don't fall in love with it, I'm not going to be the best agent for you, right? I need to be passionate about it. The majority of the authors I represent, I've represented for over 20 years. I consider it a long-term venture. And there's no, I think so many authors think just landing an agent, I've got it made. That is not the case. That's just the first step. You know, there's so many other steps. And once you get an agent, and even once you sell a book, this isn't like a straight shot up. This is a roller coaster. There's ups, there's downs, there's curves you don't anticipate, and you want someone to be by you during all those times. Your editor may leave. They may decide to close the imprint. What you write may suddenly be out of style. So you need to be adaptive, and your agent needs to be adaptive with you.